بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. About 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Battle of Qadisiyah, in which we talked about how the preparation was made for Battle of Qadisiyah and how the delegations were sent by Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu an to, first it was sent to Yazdgard, the king, and later on to Rustam. And we talked about how those delegations interacted with the king Yazdgard and the general Rustam as well, the one who was leading the army in Qadisiyah. And today, inshallah, we'll talk about how the days of the Qadisiyah went. And inshallah, today will be the last day for the Battle of Qadisiyah. But before we go into that, as we mentioned in the previous talk, that Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu an, he was sick during this battle. Even though he was sick, he was having pains in his back, and to the point he was not able to sit or stand. Hence, he was lying on his chest while he was leading the army. And even though he was sick and even though the situation he was in, he was very well aware of the situation of the army. Not much different, well, in a sense of, we can see how Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an as well, he was keeping track of the movement of the Muslim army towards the Persians. Even though Umar was in Medina, so I cannot say exactly the same, but Umar was keeping track of all the movements. And even at the end, we will see how Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an, when he found out the outcome of the battle, he was continuously going outside the outskirts of Medina and waiting for somebody to come back from Qadisiyah so he can get the report from them about what happened there. But anyways, so Rustam, he moved forward. So Rustam met the delegations, 3 different people from the army of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, that included Rabi' bin Amir radiallahu anh, Hudayfa bin Mahsan, and Mughira bin Shu'bah. And one thing that struck him was all 3 of them, even though they were from probably different tribes, but because they were Muslim, following the same aqidah, part of the same army, the way they were discussing the matter with Rustam there was no difference. They may have differences in the looks or where they're from, but because they were Muslim, he was surprised by that. He was amazed by that, how similar they were in their discussion with them. And now the army of the Persia moved towards the Muslims, and so Rustam sent one of the spies among the Muslims to find out what they are like, the Muslims. And he went there, and he spent during the part of the night and the day, and he came back, and he mentioned to him about, he barely saw them eating. He was surprised about looking at the army. What he saw, Muslims were doing the miswak when the time of the salah was there. So he said he did not see them eating. He saw them putting the stick in their mouth and chewing on it. So that was surprising for him to see what was going on. Of course, we know that miswak or the siwak, there are recommendations for us to do that. Of course, this is an action that has its own merit. Sometimes we find many of the Muslims, they mix these things as if miswak is the one that you fight with. That's not the case. When it comes to fighting, you find the Muslims are fighters, and they were fighting. So when the Rustam's army was getting closer to the Muslim army, he heard the adhan. And when he heard the adhan, he got anxious. And right away, he thought he was going to be attacked. So hence, he talked to the person who went to get the information about the Muslims. And he said, no, 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 calm down. They're just praying. That's all they're doing when they were going to pray. So that was the Fajr time. And then the same thing happened around the Dhuhr time as well. So just the adhan itself was having an impact on the Rustam, and he was becoming very anxious about that. Now, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, on the other hand, he gathered the Sahaba and or the rest of the army, whether they were from the Sahaba or the Tabi'een. He gathered them, and among them, he gathered the leaders among them. And he told them to go and speak to the people as you should at times of war, because you hold a prominent position among them. Because when the leaders of those people, you have to understand, there's a leadership among the people. So Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu was a leader of the army, but there were other people. There's an army of about 30,000 plus people of the Muslimin there. And that army had its own leadership between the people, whether it's a tribe, whether the region they are from. So they were leading their own part of the army. So the different leaders, they went and they motivated the people. And that included Qais ibn Hubayra, Ghalib ibn Abdullah, Basr ibn Abi Raham al-Juhani, and Asim bin Amr, Rabi' ibn Bilal, and Rabi' ibn Amir radiallahu anhum. All of them, they went back to their people and they motivated them. Like example of that is, as Asim said, "O Arabs, you are the leaders of the Arabs and you are confronting the leaders of the Persians. What is at stake is nothing less than paradise, the Jannah. They should not be more eager for this world than you are for paradise." So now here, remember that here when most of the people around him at that time were Arab. It's not the issue of Arabism or nationalism that he was trying to press on. It's a way of talking to them. Because the people who were there among them were Arabs, so he's addressing them. As we know, that Islam is very clear about when it comes to the issue of nationalism, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam very clearly mentioned even in his last khutbah that he gave at the Hajj, in which he reminded us of that the Ajam has no preference over the Arab, and Arab has no preference over the Ajam. Ajam means non-Arab. So Arabs have no preference over the non-Arabs, and non-Arabs don't have any preference over the Arabs, except the taqwa. So taqwa is the one that can make one person better than the other. And taqwa, when we talk about, which is the righteousness, it is measured by Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah is the one who knows the best, who is muttaqi and who is not, who has the taqwa more than the other one. So only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one. So this is just to remember that. Main idea that he was calling people towards is the Jannah, to remind them of the Jannah. Similarly, Rabi' bin Amr said, Allah has guided you to Islam and has united you therein and shown you the Nasr or the victory. In patience there is comfort. So accustom yourself to patience and you will get used to it. Do not accustom yourself to panic and let it become a habit. Look, there's a very interesting thing here. And there's a reason that I wanted to talk about this specific one, and you will see later on when the battle was at peak. Sahaba ridwanullah alayhim and the rest of the people who were along with them, they started reminding each other of patience a lot. Now, think of it today, many times we think of patience as a virtue of not doing anything sometime. If the Muslim attacked, then you talk about patience in the sense of doing anything. You're not supposed to do anything. Just sit back and watch. That's not what the patience is. That's not what the sabr is. Look, they are in the middle of the battlefield. Muslims are fighting at that time to the Persian Empire, a superpower. And they are reminding each other of the patience. What does it mean by sabr then? Sabr is to stick with what Allah Azza wa Jal has commanded us. No matter how tough the situation becomes, you continue to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained on us. That's what it means by sabr. It's as a matter of fact, the better translation I think for sabr is more of perseverance than to say the patience, because patience in English language sometimes can be taken in a. He reminded them from the ayah here to society, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّاتٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ عُدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. He said, hurry up, rush towards the maghfirah from your Rabb, the mercy, the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and towards the Jannah, which is the vastness of this Jannah is of the heavens and the earth. This is how they motivated each other. So that remember, what is the motivational factor over here? It is only and only to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to enter the Jannah. This is what their target was, this was their goal was. And this is how we as Muslim should always strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to achieve Jannah, to enter into Jannah, inshallah. Okay, now the first day, which is also referred as Yom Armath, this is the first day of the battle. And when this the Yom Armath, or the day of Armath, dawned on the day of the Qadisiyah, Sa'ad radiallahu anhu, he gave instructions to the army, say, wherever you are and do not move until you pray Dhuhr. And when you have prayed Dhuhr, I will say takbir. So he gave the instruction on the movement. He said he will say the first takbir. So say takbir and get ready. Remember that takbir was not given to anyone before you, and it was only given to you as support for you. Then when you hear the second takbir, say takbir and be ready. And when I say the third takbir, say takbir and let your horsemen go forward. Why is he talking about the horsemen here? In the past, the battles used to happen in a manner that you will have an individual combatant come from your side and the other army side. And these are the real, one of the best among you, the fighters that you have, that you send forward. Because this can have a great impact on the rest of the battle when the regular fighters will start fighting with each other. Because these are their leaders, and when they are fighting with each other, that kind of shows which direction the battle is going to go. And Muslims, they were expert in these kind of combats. So, and Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas said, when I say the fourth takbir, then all march forward until you meet your enemy. So on the fourth, he said, all of you will move forward. These are the instructions he said. And he said, continue to say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So when Sa'ad radiallahu anhu had prepared Dhuhr, he ordered the slave whom Umar had told to stay with him, who was well versed in Quran, to recite the surah of the jihad, which is Surah Al-Anfal. So he asked him to recite the Surah Al-Anfal to remind all the people who are along with him that they are seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the only purpose, that they are in fighting with the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no other reason. And as we can see and read throughout the history of the Muslimin, these fights were not for any kind of personal gains. These fights were not done for the personal gains. Rather, it was only done for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, there could be people here and there who could have their own motives and stuff. This is not what we're talking about, but what Islam teaches us, that's what we are discussing here. Okay. And then some of the Muslims from the higher ranks from the Muslim side, and some of them from the Persian side, they came forward. They fought. This is an individual combat that happened. And Muslims came out superior in that one. But later on, Rustam, he ordered some of his troops, while he saw that the Muslims had the upper hand in individual combat. So he suddenly ordered to half of the army to go against one of the flanks of the Muslims. And that created some chaos among the Muslims. And Muslims had some loss in there. And Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anh, he moved the army in that direction and able to pull the Muslims out of the trouble that they were in. Now, in this day, another incident that happened was the elephants that the Rustam's army, they came with, that created a lot of chaos among the Muslims, because the horses were not aware of how to deal with these elephants. Hence, it became a problem for the Muslims, and that created the first day that there were some of the casualties that happened on the Muslim sides because of that. That day, there were 500 casualties among the Asad tribe, and they were in the front of the army, and Asim and Banu Tamim had been shielding the people in this battle. Now, in this one, Tulhaya ibn Khuwaylid, remember, this is the person who, at one point, he called himself as a prophet as as a false prophet. He called himself as a prophet. And later on, in the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, he came back to Islam. And whatever the claims that he was making of the prophethood, he took it back and he became a good Muslim. But Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, he did not use any of those people who were from the Murtaddin, who were apostates during his time in any of the battlefield. But Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, based on those people's the Tawbah, as he saw, he allowed them to fight along with them. And Tulaiha, he was one of those people who motivated his people a lot. He was from Banu Asad, that's why he's called Asadi as well. So he said, "Oh, my tribe, our leaders has great faith in you. If you knew that there was anyone who was more able to go to the aid of these people, he would have sent them. Charge at the enemy, go at them, fight furious lions," because they were Banu Asad. Asad means lion. So he said, fight like lions. You are called Asad, lions. So be furious as lions and never flee on turn back. Go forward and do not retreat. And this is what Tulaiha ibn Khuwailid, he motivated his people, and they were able to, they were charged up at the command of Tulaiha. Now, after that, the tribes were impressed by the courage of Banu Asad and Ashad ibn Qais al-Kindi. And Ashad ibn Qais al-Kindi said, "Oh Kinda, what a good job Banu Asad are doing." So Kinda moved from the defensive to the offensive and drove back the Persians who were in front of them. See, here you can see that as Tulaiha, he was motivating his tribe to act as their names. It's not he's trying to say, you are Banu Asad, so you are better than the others. Similarly, when we see that Ashaf ibn Qais, when he is motivating his people, he's motivating them to, from the perspective of, even though he's talking to his people because he is their leader, so he can motivate them, look how Banu Asad have done so good. So you do better than them. So in goodness, when you compete, that is something good. So there is nothing wrong in competing with each other in goodness. So you want to do better than the others. Not in the sense of the hasad, not in the sense of jealousy, not in the sense of you are putting the others down. Rather, you want to compete and do more good than the others. Now, while this battle was going on, women camp was not behind, meaning there were some of the women were along with them, which were doing the work of whether it was taking care of the injured or the sick, or even taking care of the food whatsoever among the Muslims. One of the women was Al-Khansa. Al-Khansa bint Amr. She was a famous poetess, if you want to call it, a sha'ir. And during the Jahiliyyah and later on during Islam as well. She was famous for her poetry. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to ask her to recite poetry from Khansa bint Amr. And so she had 4 sons, and she motivated her sons. She said, "You became Muslim willingly and migrated by choice. You know what Allah has promised of great reward to the Muslims who fight the Kafirs. And you know that the realm which abides is better than the realm which will pass away. Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu usbiru wa sabiru warbitu wattaqullah la'allakum tuflihun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here that, oh, you who believe, and this is what Khansa was reminding his sons with, that endure and be more patient. Again, see, the word is sabir, sabiru, have patience and guard your territory. But rabitu, that you are, whichever area you've been supposed to be guarding, then you will be guarding that. And fear Allah so that you may be successful. And she motivated them, and all 4 of them went, and all 4 of them became shaheed. All 4 of his sons became shaheed in this battle. And subhanAllah, when her sons became the shaheed, she said, Alhamdulillahi alladhi sharrafni biqatlihim. SubhanAllah. And if you think about it, what she's saying, he is thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She's saying, you have sharrafni, you have given me honor to Allah by their biqatlihim, by their passing away. وأرجو من ربي, and I hope from my Rabb أن يجمعني بهم في مستقر رحمته, that I hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will unite me with them in His rahmah, in the Jannah that she's talking about. So that shows that that their sabr, as we want to call it, their perseverance, even as a mother. Similarly, there was another mother who had 4 sons, and she said the similar thing to her sons as well, and she motivated them to go. And when they left, she's even telling them about the paradise and the Jannah is in front of you. And then when they left, then she made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, protect my sons. See, that's a key thing here. People do not go to fight. Purpose is not to go and just die. The purpose is to raise the kalimatullah, raise the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the barriers which are placed in front of you to convey the message to the people, they're trying to remove those barriers. So hence, she is making dua, and subhanAllah, for her, all 4 of her sons, they fought and they came back without being even injured. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted her dua as well. On the second day, which is called Yawm Aghwath, in that day, the division of the Syrian army that was led by Al-Qaqa. Al-Qaqa ibn Amr radiallahu an, he was a Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he came back from Iraq to support the Muslims. And Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an, he sent the commands of Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu an in Sham to send the army that was stationed there to help Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu an. And Abu Ubaidah radiallahu an, he sent Al-Qaqa and also Hashim ibn Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas, who was a nephew of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. But he kept Khalid ibn Walid because he needed him there. Again, the ground reality was more clear to Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu an there, hence he kept Khalid bin Walid, which shows that the command was not a must on him to send Khalid bin Walid, hence he was able to keep Khalid bin Walid radiallahu an. But he sent Harith ibn Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas, the nephew of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who was leading the army there. And he sent with Al-Qaqa as well. The army that went to Syria had about 9,000 soldiers, Sham, and when he sent back to Iraq, he was able to send 9,000 from them. Don't forget that, of course, when you are in Sham, you still have to take care of that area as well. It's not that once you conquer the area, you just leave. You cannot just leave. You have to continue to rule over them or maintain the all sorts of justice over there. Okay, now Qaqa ibn Amr radiallahu anh, he was a famous fighter. He was a famous fighter and he had a very loud voice. He was very famous for that, like a roar of a lion. This is how you can think of him. And the voice of Qaqa, as Abu Bakr said, that the voice of Al-Qaqa in any army is better than 1,000 men. It's not only the voice, it was referring to his voice is one aspect of it, but he was a very brave fighter. He was brave and he was wise as well. And as we will see some of the instances we'll talk about, inshallah. So what he did was he was given 1,000 soldiers under him when he is coming, because the whole army that's coming from Sham was under Hisham ibn Utbah. And Al-Qaqa was under him, but he was given a flank of 1,000. Now, what he did when he was entering the army of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, so he made sure he divided the army into 100 sections. Each one has 10. So first 10 was coming, and then while the 10 is coming, you can see that next 10 is coming. So now this way, the morale of the army became very high because they were seeing a continuous flow of army coming in. So 10 of, even though it's only 1,000 from that perspective, but 100 times 10 people came, that seemed much bigger than the 1,000 would come together. So that gave a lot. The morale of the army went very high because of that. That's what I meant by the Qaqa had. He was wise. He had wisdom of the army or the fighting as well. Besides him being brave. Then what Al-Qaqa did on second day was he and his cousin from Tamim played a trick. And what he did was, when he saw the elephants had done to the Muslims on the first day, so they did was they took their camels and they put some covering around the camels. And they were surrounded by horses. So the camel looked very strange. And there were, of course, there were people who were sitting on top of it, but camel looked very strange. So the horses that were coming from the other side of the Persian army, they got confused. As we know, many a times, when horses, they sense some sort of a trouble, they become out of control. So that created a chaos in the army of the Persians. So this is the trick that he played, that he made his camels look like something very strange, and the horses on the other side, they were not able to sense what they were, and they became out of control. And that caused a chaos in the army of the Persians. And that benefited Muslims a lot. And the second day, because of that trick that Al-Qaqa made, Muslims had the upper hand. Now, in that, there is an incident that's mentioned about the second day. There was one of the fighters in the army of the Muslims. His name was Abu Mahjan al-Thaqafi. Abu Mahjan al-Thaqafi, he was detained. Why was he detained? Because he had a bad habit of drinking. From the Muslims, he's a Muslim. He's a good fighter, but he had that. And not only that he was drinking, but he had also would used to say poetry. And he would say silly things out of his mouth when he's not under his control. And so he was detained. He wanted to really go and fight. So he was able to go to Salma binti Khasafa. And he said, "Oh, Salma, daughter of Al-Khasafa, do you want to do something good?" He wanted to get away somehow. So he wanted to go and fight. He was a real good fighter. "Can you just do me something good?" And she said, "What is it?" He said, "Let me go and lend me Al-Balqa, a horse. By Allah, if Allah keeps me safe, sound, I will come back to you and put my feet in these chains again. Free me from the chains, I'll come back, fight, come back, and I'll put myself in the chain." She said, "Why do I do that?" So he went back with his feet still in the chains, expressing in verse in a sort of way, and he was saying that. So she said, "Okay." He said, "I did the istikhara, and I am going to let you go. Okay, but I'm not going to give you the horse." So she went back to her house, but he still took the horse. So he took the horse and he went and he fought. And when he was fighting, Sahaba did not know, and the army of the Muslims did not know, that who's this guy who's fighting. They knew he's a great fighter. They're thinking probably the help from Sham came, and it's the Hashim bin Utbah. He's the one who's fighting. Now, they did not know who was. Sa'd ibn Waqqas, he said, "If I did not know that Abu Mahjan is detained, I would have thought it was Abu Mahjan." He recognized the way he's fighting. He recognized this is a fierce fighter, that's him. But he said, because I know that he is detained, he cannot be him. So he fought, he came back, and he put himself in the chains. Now, here, and he said, actually, he mentioned that when he came back, Abu Mahjan went back to where he had come from and put his feet back in the chain. And he said to Salma, said to him, "Oh, Abu Mahjan, why did this man detain you?" He asked him, "Why was he detained? Why were you detained?" He said, "By Allah, he did not detain me for something that I ate or drank. But I was a drinker at the time of Jahiliyyah." And he said, "I am a poet. I say whatever comes to my lips." So he is out of control. When he is drunk or something, he's out of control. He said, "That is why he detained me." He said, "I said in one of my poems, and the translation of the poetry is like this: if I die, bury me next to the grapevine, so that its roots may irrigate my veins." He's a drunk. And he's talking like this: if I die, bury me next to some grapevines, some juice of the grape will come and make him drink. And he said, "Do not bury me in the wilderness, for I fear that I would never taste it again." Talking about the khamr, talking about the liquor. And this is why he did it. So now, next day, Salma, She went back to Sa'ad ibn Waqqas radiallahu anhu, and she told him what happened. So he called him up, and he called him up and let him go, saying, "Go, and I will not hold anything against you for what you say unless you do it. If you're just saying it, Allah let you go. But if you do it, meaning if you're doing a haram, in that case, I will not let you go." And he said, "Rest assured that I will never do what my tongue says." If it says something objectionable, of course, something wrong, if it comes out of it, he does not mean to do it. It was more of that came out of it. Okay. Now, so that was the second day. Now, third day, which is called Yom Imas. In that day, the Persians came with a new plan. So they wanted to avoid the problem that they had faced on the first day. When in the first day, by the way, even though the elephants did create the chaos, but the Muslims were able to do was they used to have boxes on top of the camels, on the elephants. Probably you have seen those. There's a huge box they put on top of the elephant, and people would sit on it. So, and it was tied down with the belts. So Muslims were able to avoid that difficult time they were going through the elephant by cutting those belts, and that was causing those boxes to fall, and then the Muslims were fighting them. So now the Persians, they wanted to avoid this thing to happen. So they put foot soldiers around with each elephant to protect it, so people cannot come close, and the horsemen to protect the foot soldiers. So the elephants are not just elephants coming in the forward, rather they are surrounded by the foot soldiers and surrounded by the horses. So they are protecting the elephants also. So now this became difficult for the Muslims to take care of these elephants. So now Sahaba, they asked other Sahaba who were aware of the Persians, meaning how to deal with these elephants. Arabs were not aware of this problem with the elephants. They never dealt with the elephants. So they asked the people who were aware of the Persian culture. They asked him, "What should we do? What is the weakness in the elephant?" So they said, "Well, the weakness is if you can somehow hit their eyes with the arrows or something, or with the spears, or cut their trunk. This is the weakness they have. Otherwise, you come close to them, they will run over you, and you will not be able to do anything to the elephants." So now here, they saw there's a white elephant, and there was another elephant next to it. They were the one that were leading. So now Al-Qaqa radiallahu an, he moved forward with his cousin. And when he moved forward, so both of them, they asked the other fighters of the Muslims to distract the ones who are surrounding the elephants, and they were sneaking around the elephants, and both of them attacked the elephant's eyes. And once they were able to throw the small spears into the eyes of the camel from both sides, then Qaqa went forward and he cut off the trunk of the camel. Of course, that disabled that camel, or that elephant, and the elephant actually started running towards their own people. And all the people which were on the camel, on the elephant, they fell off, and then there was some sort of a chaos started, because the elephant is going, because it cannot see and already injured, so it started actually killing their own people as well. And same thing was done to the second one as well by the other soldiers in the Muslim army, and they were able to create a chaos, and their own elephants became the cause of the destruction of the army of the Rustam. And now the army of the Rustam, or the Persians, they started running towards the river now. Now, so this was the third day. Now, third day, they continued to fight until the midnight. And the fight continued on. And Tulayha ibn Khuwailid, as we talked about previously about how his Banu Asad was fighting, he was told by Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas to go and protect the Muslims. There was a weak spot on one side of the Muslim army. So what he did was he not only protected them, but he went forward. Went beyond. And he was able to go behind the army of the Persians. And when he went behind the army of the Persians, he started saying Allahu Akbar. When he starts screaming Allahu Akbar, now suddenly everybody stopped, because Allahu Akbar is coming from the behind of the Persian army, and that relieved both sides of the armies that they stopped fighting. Suddenly, this chaos happened and they stopped fighting. So they were able to retrieve on the third night actually. But during the third night, later on, the fighting started again. And that night is called Al-Harir, or Laylatul Harir. The reason it's called Laylatul Harir, because the ones who were fighting, they were not talking to each other. Rather, they were making just some noises, like grunting noise, which is the Harir. So that's called Laylatul Harir. So the Muslims continued to fight. So the whole day they were fighting, and then the night came and they were still fighting. And Al-Qaqa bin Amr began to fight accompanied by elite forces before Sa'ad and said takbir, but so Sa'ad told him that you go forward and fight when he says takbir. So he was going forward, Al-Qaqa, but before Sa'ad said takbir, he moved forward and he started fighting with them. Which is, of course, in these kind of scenarios, it's not something good, but Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anh, he prayed for Al-Qaqa for not following the orders for his forgiveness. Now, the fighting during the night was intense, and they continued fighting from the first part of the night until the morning. So basically, the third night, the third day they fought, and that entered into the whole night they were fighting, and until the morning came. So that was a long fight for them. After that, the fourth day, which was what they call the day of the Qadisiyah, because this is the final day when the Muslims start fighting. Al-Qaqa went about among the people and said, he reminded them of that victory will come to those soon. So to those who show patience, again, see the word comes patience. The one who will show sabr, they are the one who will be awarded victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so the patience, again, the point here is patience is used as an opposite of panic or to become nervous. Not patience means not to do anything. So sabr here is that you continue to do as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, and don't become hopeless that victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you continue to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you, Allah will grant you the victory. And now Qaqa radiallahu an, he again reminded the other leaders who were in the army to motivate the others. And Al-Qaqa, even though he himself was not the leader of the army, as we have talked about. He was sent from Sham, and he was under Harith ibn Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anh. But Harith ibn Utbah also understood when Qaqa was making decisions, if it is the right thing to do, he also listened and he followed, even though he was under him, Al-Qaqa. Okay. On the fourth day, So on the fourth day, when the army was moving towards the Persians, they found the throne of the Rustam, meaning Rustam was on his throne and he was moving towards the Muslim army. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that day sent a wind also. That wind caused them to he fell off of the throne that he was on, Rustam, and he damaged a disc in his back. Now, when this happened on the fourth day, he started running, and he wanted to escape, and he wanted to escape for his life. While he was running, one of the soldiers of the Muslim army, Hilal, he ran after him. He caught up with him, and he grabbed his leg, and then he dragged him, and he killed him. And then he screamed, "I have killed Rustam." When he said that he has killed Rustam, and he said by the Rabb of the Kaaba that he has done that, the morale of the army of the Persians went down. And the whole army started running away. And they went towards Al-Atiq River, and the Muslims were able to grab as many soldiers as was possible, especially the ones who were in chains. So remember one thing, during those times, for the army to be steadfast, especially talking about those kuffar, they used to tie each other with the chains, so they will not be able to run away. They have to fight. Now they are in chains and they're trying to run. They cannot run. Hence, they were not able to run, and the Muslims were able to be victorious over 120 plus thousand army of the Persians, while the Muslims were about 30,000. There were about 8,000 plus martyrs from the Muslim side, about 8,500. That include many of the great Sahaba and many of the people, we probably don't know the names of them, but there were about 8,500 martyrs. And this was one of the biggest losses from the perspective of the numbers wise from the Muslim side, even though it is one of the biggest victory for the Muslims, because that opened the doors for the victory towards the whole Persia. This was the main battle against the Persians, because Yazgard basically, he gathered as big of army as he could at that time, and 120,000 that I have mentioned, that was the beginning of the first army that he sent. And after that, there were reinforcements were sent as well. And Yazgard was trying to unite the people, and they were thinking of this is the way. For them, it was the last chance to keep the Sassanid empire together. And after that, obviously, we saw that in the history that after this loss, Persians were not able to rise up again. Now, after this victory happened, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, he sent the news through Sa'd ibn Umayla al-Farazi. And he said in his letter, Allah has granted us victory over the Persians and has given them the same punishment as those came before them. After a lengthy fight and much distress, they fought the Muslims with numbers that the like of which has never been before. But Allah did not benefit them thereby. Rather, He benefited the Muslims instead. The Muslims followed them along the rivers and river banks and in the mountains passes. So wherever they were running, Muslims followed them, and they were able to come out victorious. And that whole area came under the Muslims. Now, Umar al-Khattab, on the other hand, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, he used to go in the outskirts of Medina to find out what was the status of the battle. And once he was on the outskirts of the Medina, and he saw someone was coming from Qadisiyah. Now, he asked him, "O slave of Allah, tell me about this." So he said, "Allah has defeated the enemy." Umar ran beside him, asking him questions, and the man continued to answer him. Now, he's continuously asking and until they enter Medina. This person who's answering Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh did not know he's talking to Amir al-Mu'mineen. When they enter Medina, when somebody says that, "Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen," so then this guy said, "May Allah have mercy on you. Why didn't you tell me that you are Amir al-Mu'mineen?" So Umar said, "Don't worry about it, my brother." And he says, continuously asking questions. He was so anxious to know about the victory. He was continuously going outside of Medina to get the news from him. And once he get the news, and the other person is not telling him all the details as well, because he wants to convey the details to the Amir al-Mu'mineen first. So once this happened, one thing to remember here is how anxious Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh was about the affairs of the Muslims. He could have sent somebody else to go outside of Medina. When somebody comes from Qadisiyah, bring him to Umar al-Khattab and he'll get the news. No. He himself was anxious. He wanted to know the news. Second, he's not the one who will be, the moment the person comes from Qadisiyah trying to show him, he's Amir al-Mu'mineen, give me all the information that you have. Rather, he's just collecting information whatever he can. He's not the one who's trying to show off his power or authority. Rather, he wanted to get the information firsthand as Umar. Now, after Umar al-Khattab received this information about the victory, he announced, and he said, "I am very keen not to leave any need without meeting it, so long we are flexible with one another. If that is not, we support one another until we all are equal and have enough to survive. I wish you knew what I have in my heart for you, but there is no way for you to know except by my action. By Allah, I am not a king to enslave you. Rather, I am a slave of Allah who has been given a trust. If I keep away from the public wealth and I spend it on you and make sure that you all have enough food and water in your houses, then I would be blessed. If I kept it for myself, I would have a short-lived joy, but I would be doomed for a long time." Talking about the wealth that came from Persia. So there's a huge amount of wealth that came from the opening of the Persia, and he wanted to make sure people understand that this is not for Umar to himself to keep, rather it is for the Muslims to be distributed among. Again, at the end of the day, it's not the issue of that you are just going to each and every individuals who are living in the area and you are usurping the wealth of the people. This is coming from the battlefield. Whatever came from the battlefield or the land was open, that is coming under the state, and he was distributing the goods among all the citizens of the state, including the people who were Muslims or non-Muslims at that time over there. So inshallah, we'll stop here about, this was about the Battle of Qadisiyah, and we will talk about the other rest of the conquest of the Iraq and the east of the Iraq, inshallah, in the coming lectures. But if there is any questions or comments about the subject that was covered today,